Hi, I'm Beck and I'm a property investor.
And I'm Daria. I own my own home and I'm curious about investing.
We're the hosts of Investors in the Wild.
We've heard it all before. Build your wealth, get expert advice, learn about high yield, high growth investments, blah, blah, blah.
That's just not us. We're real mates with real talk about real estate. No ego, no financial advice.
It's all about wins you can use right now.
Let's get into it.
I had a 2-bedroom apartment in Darling Point. It was a beautiful Art Deco apartment in a building of only 6 apartments. We decided, let's sell. And we ended up choosing the agent who sold the most expensive 2-bedroom apartment that was comparable to ours in our suburb. They say, hey, we've got all these potential buyers, people who are really interested, exciting. We've got 6 people who seem really solid. They then contacted everyone and said, hey, auction date's this day. Or a lot of people started dropping off. And suddenly we had 1 potential buyer, which you wouldn't do an auction for. They tried to tell us that the property was worth less than what we thought. And we're like, well, you sold the one down the road. We're just getting a sense that we're getting manipulated.
Rebecca, can you share a really quick intro of yourself?
Sure. My name's Rebecca. I'm in my 30s and I have 2 young daughters and a husband, and I live in the eastern suburbs of Sydney.
Beautiful. And what we wanted to do differently today is go really deep on one of the experiences that investors have, and in this case, it's selling your investment property. So could you start off by maybe giving us an intro on what the investment property was, how long you had it, why you decided you wanted to sell when you did?
Sure. I had a 2-bedroom apartment in Darling Point. It was a beautiful Art Deco apartment in a building of only 6 apartments. It was really beautiful. It had hard wooden floors, high ceilings. I had this cute little view of the Harbour Bridge, and it had a sunroom. And it was quite a big apartment as well. It's 95 square meters. So it was, a really nice space. We bought it in 2021 and we ended up selling it in 2024. So we held it for about 3 years. And then as far as wanting to sell, we realized because of our young family, it just wasn't going to be the best, place for us long term. So there was no outdoor space. There was no parking. It wasn't quite big enough for a growing family. And it was a big apartment, but I think for us, the main thing was not having that outdoor space. So we thought, hey, should we look at upsizing? Should we look at selling? And then the other reason we sort of thought, hey, should we start looking at this is our fixed rate was about to roll off as well. So we were really lucky and fixed at 1.94, which is quite insane now looking at it. And we were going to roll off in about 9 months or something. And we thought, hey, should we hold on to the property and pay, a much higher interest rate on holding onto this property, or should we sell because it's not going to be good for us long term either? So we decided, let's sell.
As like a bit of a side note, the reason, and Rebecca, tell me if I've read this right, but the reason why buying in a block of 6 apartments is even mentioned is if you want to buy an apartment, the worst thing you can do is buy in a block of 40, 50, 60, 100 apartments. Buying in a smaller block means there's scarcity, there's more exclusivity, you've got more of a say in the strata, there's less of a chance of when you sell, there's another 1 or 2 apartments in the same building selling. And so buying in such a small block is what investors tend to prefer.
Yeah, no, that's really eye-opening, especially I think we've heard with our past interviews, the strata kind of nightmares. So having less people having an input in eggshell or egg cream in the foyer is probably much preferred. So Rebecca, how did you go about selecting your agent to sell the property?
So we had a look at a few different agents in the area, but then we ended up choosing the agent who sold us the property. And our logic behind this was we felt like she did a really good job at, pushing us up on the price when we went in. I think we potentially paid an extra 100K more than we needed to. And because of that, we're like, well, she got us on the way in. She can help us do okay on the way out, and then hopefully net will be okay. So that was our logic. We're like, we've seen firsthand how you can really put pressure on a buyer. So you should be able to do that again, logically. So that's why we ended up using her. But in saying that, she was also very helpful. Like when we sort of had those meetings with her and we talked about, we want to spruce up the kitchen a little bit. We wanted to potentially look at fixing the bathroom and making it a bit nicer and just, bits and play things here and there. She always made time. She always talked us through like different things. And, she'd say, oh, this color would be better, or I wouldn't bother putting money into, changing the bathroom, but yes, adding an internal laundry will help. So we were like, okay, great. She's really helpful in helping us figure out what is worth investing money into, fixing the property. And also we know she was a hard negotiator. So we're like, okay, she should be good for us. So that's why we chose her.
Oh, sorry, Daria, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, because I have this, again, I oftentimes bring real estate agents in to sell my existing home. And I guess I struggle with knowing, because a lot of them say the same thing and they say the right things. Did you interview a variety of agents, or did you just go with the one that sounded good?
That's literally what I was going to ask. I was like, did you interview people?
Yeah, because I've not done that, but I would love to do that.
Never
like
done
$1 million listing where they all come in and bid for your business,
And they should. I think the thing is, we spoke to a few over the phone. We didn't necessarily have, I think we had one other person come through, but we spoke to quite a few over the phone. But then they all say the same thing, quite frankly. Like, we didn't feel like any of them were particularly great. And the way we saw it as well is we wanted to understand, what were the results that people had actually achieved. And she'd actually sold the most expensive 2-bedroom apartment, like that was comparable to ours in our suburb. So we were like, you've got that data point. You've also been very good at negotiating. Like, we've seen firsthand what you were like. And all the other agents, we weren't able to get sort of any other tactile, points where we're like, okay, we can, hold that against you and say, yeah, you've done that really well. So from that perspective, or just like, we know you well enough that you can do the job if you want to do the job. Whereas choosing someone else, it's like, it's just on face value of like, oh, we'll get you a great price. We'll get you a great price. And it's like, okay, that doesn't really assure me in any way.
So it feels like a couple of things. First, you'd seen firsthand what she's capable of. And second, she had gotten a really good price for a comparable 2-bedroom apartment in the area.
Yeah.
And kind of actions speak louder than words, I guess.
Exactly. And especially we feel like with agents, they do as well. But in saying that, I guess from my experience, I don't know if any agent is going to be fantastic. So maybe I'm just scarred from everything.
I have often wondered, I wonder if they would make more effort if I was selling a $10 million property as opposed to something that's a fraction of that. But hearing you say, like, you spoke to quite a few people, with the place on the Central Coast, the last agent did such a poor job. Rebecca, I think I told you, Daria, I don't know if I told you, but when those last tenants left, they left like $40,000 worth of damage to the house. It was a nightmare. It was an actual nightmare. And after that, I decided, you know what, I'm going to interview the agents who manage the properties, because I am not going to just go, okay, this person has good ratings on Rate My Agent, or okay, I've been with this person for a while. I'm going to interview them because I am paying them. And just like I would interview anyone else who I was paying, these people need to impress me from day dot. And because I can't have someone cost me $40,000, when a tenant moves out. And so it's funny, now I interview agents and I will tell them I'm interviewing a few agents in the area. Here are the rates they're telling me. Here's the number of inspections. And so when I think about this, if I am interviewing agents who are just managing agents and I'm paying them like, what, $100 a month, how much more should you be interviewing agents when they can literally make a difference of a couple $100,000? Like this should actually be, if you stood to gain or lose a few $100,000 based on who you trusted, why don't we interview them? thoroughly.
100%. I think it's so important. And also I think it's a bit of a cop-out to think, and it's true because we all think so, but that they're selling these mansions and then my little apartment, and the expectation should be lower because it's an apartment, but absolutely not. It's a job. It's their job. And I think that's kind of partially the litmus test as well. It is the agent who's fighting tooth and nail for that small apartment, who's probably worthwhile, winning your business, because worthy of winning your business, because, it's like everyone's got a job to do. And so we should be we shouldn't have low expectations of the agents. And I think sifting through a bunch of real estate agents to get to that point, to your point, Beck, is really worth it, because it could be the difference of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And also, am I wrong in assuming that agents have certain values that they sell up to before they go into the big, or is it just they get it free for all? They get $10 million or they get $1 million. Is that how it is? Okay. Because I assumed that, I don't know, because again, I watch these TV shows all the time. I'm obsessed with these reality shows around real estate, but they always say, I sell up to, $2.5 million properties. And then the next one's like, I've got the $20 million plus properties in the agencies. So is it different in Australia? They're American based. Is it different in Australia? Okay.
I've seen Gavin Rubinstein in an apartment in Bellevue Hill selling I think it was under 2 mil at the time. So and he's on one of those shows. Yeah. And he was just at a viewing.
So they need their bread and butter as well. They wouldn't be doing it if they didn't need it. So they need that commission. So
I think the thing to think about as well, though, Daria, with this is, and this is for you as well, Beck, when you're interviewing people, they can do the hard sell when you interview them. Once you've signed up with them, they can very much change, because you've suddenly, and that's what we've talked about, you lose your power once you've signed up with them. So it's all very well to interview someone, but you've got to prepare to fight them once you've actually signed as well. And it's a bit of a gamble. And you can ask other people and say, oh, you've used this agent, are they good? But they may not realize that they got, screwed over. So
100%.
It's really hard.
That's what this is about, right? This podcast is about highlighting those points so that the basic person who's the regular person who's trying to sell understands more clearly whether they're on the right track or whether they're being ripped off. But I do think, your point's absolutely valid. If you're in charge of sales, you've got to take everything with a grain of salt, because people are going to try and do a sell job. But I think from my perspective, as someone who's totally green in this space, I would feel more comfortable having done that, knowing that there's a 70% chance that everything they're saying is probably, full of crap, than going in blind and just not interviewing them at all. So at least, because you sort of got to gauge as well, I think instinct plays a role. I think luck plays a role. So there's things that are not quantifiable that you need to sort of go in with. But I think from my perspective, and it's very laborious, right? Having people come into your home and to sit down and interview them, no one wants to do that. But I think doing that gives you a little bit more than not doing that. You did research on their sales history. I didn't even think to do that, to be honest with you. That sounds that is so wise. And it's probably the first step everyone should take, is looking at their agents. Probably it's almost like a prerequisite before you even interview them. It's I want these agents because they've got better results than these other agents, so I'll get them to come in.
Yeah. What's good about doing that as well is, and this is where one of the things we challenged them on is when we were looking at, the price guide and what our expectations were, they tried to tell us that the property was worth less than what we thought. And we're like, well, you sold the one down the road for, I think it was 2 million or 2 million plus. And they were like, oh no, but that one's got, a little, a tiny, I'm talking the tiniest balcony, it's not even really usable. And I'm like, yeah, but our apartment's a lot bigger and it's in a smaller block. And we've got all these other things. We've got a little view of the Harbour Bridge. They don't have any views, all these things. And so, and we're like, and you're the one who sold it at that price. So you should be able to sell this one for just as much, if not more. And so, whereas if you're using another agent, they can be like, oh, well, I didn't sell that property. I don't know what the situation was. Like, well, no, you did sell that one, so you can do it again.
Yeah, I expect that standard.
That's actually, like, again, it's just another aha moment for me, is not only does it give you the ability to say, well, you sold it, but it actually gives you an extra advantage to negotiate, because they're always going to try and bring you down, like the price down, to get the business and make their lives easier, and also to manage your expectation. So if they do sell it over the price that they've committed to you, then they look really good. But I think you going in there, that's your power position, and it puts you in a different light, and it probably gives them that extra nudge to not only commit to you to get that price, but to work harder to get that for you, knowing that they've made that commitment. So
yeah, you're on the hook. You're on the hook. I know
Yeah.
you've done this before. You're accountable. I'm not just going to take your advice. Like, be better. Do you want to take us through, you list the property. What were they advising with the guiding price? How did things go in that first week? And how quickly before things started to turn and you realized, oh, this agent isn't quite what we thought she was going to be?
Yeah, so it was actually 2 agents. It was 2 female agents together. And so basically, if I go from sort of start to finish, the process was, obviously, we had them come through and we talked about, the pre-sale stuff, signed the contract. And then we had, we talked about price guide, what our expectations were. So I think they put a price guide, they suggested we put a price guide of 1.7. We were like, look, we really want 2. We want 2. That's our, we were potentially okay with 1.9, but we really wanted 2 to 2.1. If it went over 2.1, we'd be like over the moon. But we were like, we feel like that was fair based on what else sold around in the area. And it was quite a unique property as well. And there were a lot of things that were great about it. And so they were like, no, we should bring it down lower so we can get more people interested. And we're like, well, you're meant to be the expert, so we'll go with your guidance on this. This is why we're paying you, because you're paying them a commission. Like, they're meant to be working in your best interest. And it's funny because looking back, I'm like, oh, I can see why they would push for this. But basically what it does is it brings a whole lot of extra people in to the inspections that may not have been interested. And that does help you as well, because it creates that sense of urgency and popularity for the people who may be in your price brackets. And that's what they said. And so I agree with that. If you suddenly have a really full open home, people are like, oh, I'm a bit nervous. I really want this property. Maybe I'll go a bit higher. But the other thing it does is it creates, all these potential buyers. And so they say, hey, we've got all these potential buyers, people who are really interested. And we're like, oh, this is exciting. We've got 6 people who seem really solid. And then after a couple of weeks, we're like, okay, so do we have any offers on the table? Do we have any strong offers? And they were like, oh, we haven't really pushed them yet. We need to put an auction date in, pay this $2,000 non-refundable auction fee so that we can create that urgency for them. And we're like, oh, okay, well, and looking back, I would not do that again, obviously. But we took their advice because we thought, hey, we need to do this to create the urgency for people to actually put offers in.
This is one of the craziest things. That fee is $2,000 for the auctioneer and for that time. And even if the auctioneer never auctions the place, even if the place is sold a week before auction, they still get that money.
Yeah.
You pay for something that you never actually get.
Exactly.
It's wild. And it's thousands.
It's thousands. It's $2,000. I would love to have that $2,000 back in my bank account, please.
And also the other thing is this, just from my perspective, and I am not an agent, so I'm sure we'll probably get some letters from agents writing in to say, no, you're wrong. But as a customer, as soon as I see auction, I run for the hills. I don't want to be part of an auction. So it's almost like, for me, if I was going to sell a property, I would rather at least test everything else before going down the auction path, because there's a lot of risks, right, with an auction. So it's almost like, I don't know if this is justified, but it feels like in your case when they're like, well, we've got the people in, now we need to add the auction to create the demand. It's like, are you just trying to cut corners and make your job easier rather than pushing these people who've already come in to see to make calling them all and, you know, doing that work to
yeah. Look, I guess I can kind of see the logic where they say a lot of people don't like auctions, and so they'll try and put offers in pre-auction. And it, like, if there is no auction date, there's no end date, then there's no urgency to put an offer in, and they can see what other properties come on the market. So I can see both sides. It hurts that it's non-refundable, and the fact that they said they had like 6 really strong contenders, and then once the auction date, like, it was all done, like, and put in place, and that money was gone, they then contacted everyone and said, hey, auction date's this date, you know, if you like that, we are open to offers pre-auction. And they started saying, you know, where we expected it to be around the $2 million, or a lot of people started dropping off. And suddenly we had, I think it was 1 potential buyer, which you wouldn't do an auction for. And we're like, why would you not have checked to see if they were in our price range before setting an auction? That's $2,000 we probably didn't need to spend. And you probably didn't need to put that kind of pressure on any of them, because you could have said, hey, are you willing to pay $2 million for this property? No? Cool. Yep. Cross this person off. Oh, there's only 1 person left. Well, we're definitely not going to say auction. There's $2,000 we could have saved. And that's what I find frustrating.
What were they advertising the price for? Like,
So the price guide was 1.7, and then when people were going through, they were advertising it at 1.8. And then as they started talking to people in more detail, they were saying, look, you need to be around the 2. Like, if you put in 2, that's when they'll start taking, and we were taking it seriously at the 2, but we also felt like they just hadn't done a lot. They hadn't really done a lot to negotiate, to put pressure. And I think because we experienced firsthand what it was like to have that pressure put on us, we were like, no, we're paying you tens of thousands of dollars to pay, like, you know, to sell this property. Do your job, you know?
For perspective, if my calcs are right, a $2 million sale brings them in $36,000 in commission. Off
what rate did you put in?
1.8.
Yeah, so and this is another thing people need to do on signing up with any agent. Like, 2 things. 1, see if you can negotiate not to be exclusive, because if you have more than 1 agent selling a property, well, it doesn't mean you have to have them selling at the same time. It just means you're not trapped in with someone. So if you're suddenly like, hey, I don't feel like you're doing a good job, you're not stuck with them for another 6 weeks, you know, in that critical selling period. You can say, you know what, I don't think you're doing a good job. I'm going off with someone else. Whereas if you say you're exclusive with them, suddenly you're like, okay, well, I can't, you know, sell my property without going through you, even though you're not giving me anything and you're not doing, you know, I don't think you're doing a good job. So that's one thing. And the second thing is, when you're talking about the commission rates, you definitely should negotiate on those as well. Whatever they say, try going like, I don't know, another 0.5 lower and then make them halfway or something. Like, she said 1.8, we went with 1.8, and then we stupidly said, hey, like, if you get us the higher price point of 2.1 or higher, like, we'll give you 2% or 2.1%. I can't even remember, because we were like, oh, that will motivate them.
Yeah.
But it does. They're just like, cool, I'll take some extra cream if I get there, but I'm not going to risk, you know, $40,000 worth of commission for an extra $2,000 when I'm going to sell another property tomorrow.
So this has kind of raised 2 big questions for me. Really, really good advice, by the way, Rebecca. That's golden. So with the price point, do you think if they're trying to negotiate exclusivity, obviously you're going to try to avoid it at all costs, but is there, so that there's a split in the power dynamic, would it be possible, do you think, to negotiate, well, if you want exclusivity, then you need to put a minimum price that you're going to sell my property for into the contract. So you can get exclusivity if you're going to sell my property for 2.1 million. Otherwise, if there's any risk that that's not going to happen, it would be in my best interest to leave it open. That's my first question.
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer that first, if you don't mind. But I think the thing is with that, you're already paying about 10K in listing fees. So if you don't sell, it's not ideal. So you need to, first of all, decide, how badly do I want to sell? How hard do I want to push? am I going to be really upset? And is it going to be a massive issue if I do the listing fees and all of that, pay $10,000 in that and not sell? So from our perspective, we wanted to sell, but if we didn't sell, we were okay with it because it was a beautiful product. Yes, it would be really annoying to lose 10K on listing fees and all of that kind of stuff. But we're like, no, we are prepared not to sell. So I think that's the first thing you kind of need to think about with that.
So thank you. The other big question was just around the commission that they get. So I guess to navigate through, what would be so I guess in looking at it, you've got a hot market when things are just selling off the shelves. And so the commission would be probably lower versus if it's nothing is selling and it's going to be a really hard slog, maybe you would push it a little bit higher. What would be a good commission rate, do you think? That would it depend on the way the market is, or would you just be always going 0.5% less than whatever they want?
Honestly, it really depends. And so we did a lot of research, and this is where Reddit forums are amazing to just have a look at that. But two major factors. One, location. So location has a big impact. So whether it's metro city areas versus regional areas, the rate, I think regionally it's usually higher. But then the other thing is the price, like the value of the property itself. Like if you're selling a $20 million property, you're not going to get as higher commission rate. And you should make sure that you're not giving them such a high, rate, because they shouldn't be getting that. But I think the other thing is research your suburb and have a look. Actually go ask a whole lot of agents and say, oh, what commission rate do you offer? And see what they all say. Then whoever says the lowest one, then maybe go to all of them, say, I'll give you 5% lower than that, or I'll give you, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's how I would do it next time if I was researching.
I do think the state of the market really matters. Like if the market's cooling, then people, I think, will be more desperate and willing to compromise to get the property and they will negotiate down that rate. Whereas if it's a hot market and they've just got so much, so many properties, they might be okay to be like, we just lose one. But I think now would be certainly in Sydney, the market is cooling. There aren't as many places for sale. I think you're more likely to get away with saying, hey, can you cut? I'm going to give you 0.5% less. What do you say?
Yeah. And I think that's totally right there, because if you think about it from their perspective, they've only got so many hours in a day, so they've only got so many listings they can physically do opens for and all of that. And so if you're going to fight them on commission, they'll just go for the next easy person. But yeah, it's I think one of those things that it's an easy way to save some money on selling. And it's something that a lot of people don't do. And I think the other thing is there's no harm in asking, like what happens if they say no? Okay, well, then you pay the rate that you were always going to pay.
Yeah.
So I really don't think it's an issue. And to be quite frank, if they're going to say no and say no, it does have to be 1.8 or it does have to be whatever, and then you leave it for a week and then you come back to them and then they start ignoring your calls, they're probably going to do that with potential buyers as well. Do you really want them to be your agent?
Yeah. It's a good test of how hungry they are in general. Can we hear about what happened once the listing was live? So you said, everyone, at one point, 6 people are interested. You're like, all right, this is good. Then they say, all right, we need to sell an auction date. Give us $2,000. We'll lock in an auctioneer. 2 days later, everyone's dropped out. You've only got one person left.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like they do that because it then creates that scarcity mindset for the vendor, and they're like, oh, you've only got one person left, you better accept whatever offer it is. Because I think the thing is with agents, and this is me obviously being very broad in my comments, but they want whatever is going to secure the sale as quickly as possible. Because it's not so much that obviously part of it is not wanting to put in extra time in opens and stuff, but a big part is just not wanting to lose the sale in general. They don't want to take that risk on. But yeah, so we suddenly only had one buyer, and they called us at 6 p.m. on a Friday. They knew we had kids, so it was dinner time. They're screaming in the background and they're like, oh, we've got this one person left. They've put an offer for $2 million. We really think you should take it. I think it's the best you're going to get. Like, we really, really, like, our advice would be you really should take this. And Tristan and I were just like, what? this is the first proper offer. Like the only other offer we'd been given was like below our guide. And we're like, it's the first offer. We're only 3 weeks into the campaign and you're saying that this is the best we're going to get and we should just take it. Like, and you're calling us, in a period where we're distracted, stressed kind of thing. And we're like, well, shouldn't you at least do the open tomorrow and see what comes of that? And she was like, oh, we can, but we really think you should. And we're like, it's literally tomorrow morning. Just do the open and let's talk after that. And so she did the open and then she's like, oh, do you want to come meet us at the apartment so we can talk through next steps and how the open went? And Tristan and I were like, you know what? We're just getting a sense that we're getting manipulated. Let's talk through this like over the phone so that we can kind of, make eyes at each other and sort of like hand signal things as they're talking. And also what we did quite a lot as well is we'd make it just one of us were on the phone and we say, sorry, we have to take the kids and move away. And that way we could say, look, we can't make a decision right now. We'll have to talk to the other one. And that was actually really useful because I feel like it kind of breaks up the conversation and it stops that sort of pressure building.
Sorry to interrupt, but funnily enough, KJ said something in our podcast episode with her most recent purchase. She learned, I'm not going to be rushed into this. I'm not going to be pressured by an agent. So she would do more things like, okay, cool. Let me go away and think about that. Okay, that's really helpful. I'm not going to make a decision now, And so I feel like this is a common thing of like not being pressured, creating space around yourself. And, even if it's saying, all right, well, we don't have both of us on the phone now, so we will come back to you. Just giving that time to process and be like, something's not sitting right,
Exactly.
Well, I work in cybersecurity and scamming 101 is creating a sense of urgency and asking you to act right now on make a big decision. That's literally a scammer 101 trick that they use. So creating a sense of urgency is never a good thing particularly when it comes to putting money down. When you have when money is involved, no one should ever be making a fast decision on the spot for the most part.
Yeah, and that's why we refused to meet up in person because we knew as soon as we met up in person, that power dynamic would be very different. We spoke over the phone. They pretty much said, oh, there was no additional new buyers that we should really be considering. It was really just that one woman, and basically said, yeah, it's a lot quieter than last week kind of thing. And we're like, oh, that's very convenient that suddenly there's no other buyers and no one's really interested. And basically we're like, okay, well, look, maybe we just won't sell. And that's when we started saying that to them and said, look, if we're not going to get the price that we think we should be getting, because we basically, at that point, we were like, I know we had the offer for 2, but we felt like they hadn't really put any pressure on. They hadn't really negotiated at all. And we're like, you know what? For us to earn another 100K after tax, that takes a long time, right? In addition to like what you would normally earn. And I was like, maybe we just don't sell. Yes, it's $10,000, but $10,000 in listing fees versus $100,000 that you suddenly don't get because you just took the first offer.
Yeah.
And once we started saying that, I think they started panicking because they were like, oh, we might lose this entire commission. And they're like, okay, well, yeah, we'll look at everything on Monday. We'll have a look at it. We'll sort it out. We can do this kind of thing. Because I think they were like, oh, they're just not going to sell. Because that's one of the few, I guess, bits of power you have. Like that's the one thing they don't want is for you not to sell. Anyway, on the Monday morning, we got a call and they said, oh, we've got another offer. And we were like, oh, that's weird. I thought Saturday didn't go very well. And they said, yeah, we've got an offer for 2060 from an investor. And we're like, oh, we didn't really hear much about this investor, but okay. And it was like a signed copy of the contract with the like photocopy of the check. And
so it's gone from like this person has never been mentioned to we now have a signed contract. We've got a check. You should sign, and that sounds a bit weird. And it's Monday morning, like what just happened?
Yeah, it was just very convenient. And then we're like, oh, that's great. And they're like, so would you accept 2060? And we're like, well, no, we said we said we'd sell at 2-1. I mean, maybe you can go back to that woman and say, is there any more that you can put in because they're not accepting the 2?
The original woman, you wanted to
Yeah,
go.
the original woman. Obviously not Dutch auction style, but just sort of say, is there anything more you want to give? Because they're not going to accept the 2. And there is an offer that's higher. And if not, then we can accept this supposed investor offer. And so they went back to both parties and said, will you put in any more? And we're like, okay, we only asked you to go back to the woman who offered 2, not back to the supposed investor. And then the investor just decided that they didn't want to buy the property anymore because we asked for more than the 2060. The offer was off the table. And we're like, oh, that's very weird. I don't know anyone who puts an offer in one morning and then takes it off the table a few hours later because they asked for 40K more or just a bit more.
It just doesn't make sense. Like, for you to sign it just doesn't make sense on a few levels. For you to sign a contract and sign a check, you've had your lawyers look at it. That's $500. You've, worked with your bank and you can confirm that they've given the pre-approval. That's a lot of effort. So to do all of that effort, like magically overnight, weird. Then number 2, to then go, oh, okay, I'm just going to pull all of that because you've asked for some extra money. Like, said no one ever.
No, normally you say, no, I'm just sticking at my 2060, take it or leave it. This is a deadline.
Yeah.
Like, and we were all just like, this is weird. And I said to the agent, I was like, well, I never told you to go back to the investor. That's what you did. And I was like, you need to fix this because that's not what I said. And I guess we just won't be selling then. And then an hour later, she came back and the woman had offered the 2.1. And we're like, I will never know for sure, but I believe that was the first time she may have gone back to that woman and put any pressure on that woman. What I believe agents do is they put pressure on whoever the weakest link is.
Yeah.
So they knew that we weren't very good at negotiating when we bought the place on the way in. So they probably thought, hey, they're the weakest link. And I think the other thing is, like, they just look at it and they say, okay, well, in a hot market, there's a lot of buyers. So the buyers are the weakest link. So they may put a little bit more pressure on the buyers. And I think the thing is, like, if, there are a lot of buyers, there isn't as much risk of not selling the property because, I've got 8 different people who may want it. I can, put a little bit of pressure on them because I'm going to sell the property no matter what. But when there's only a few buyers in a cooler market, they're not willing to risk anything. So they put all the pressure on the vendor, even though you're paying them. And you're like, hang on, I didn't pay you to manipulate me.
This is so many bombs are going off in my head, like, aha, 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 so many aha moments, right? This is basically, forget about real estate. This is psychological warfare, right?
Literally.
This is a psychological game of chess. So you've got one side, the agents, and then you've got the client, and 3 sides, and you've got the customer as well. And so what you've basically, I think the whole journey that we've gone through on this podcast episode, you basically told us that this agent, you felt that at particular points throughout the purchasing history, they have been purposely saying things to manipulate you, i.e. saying and doing things like even going down the auction path and then only having one person. And so that gave that sense of scarcity to you. And now basically saying you've only got one offer. Oh, there's another offer, but you've lost it because you wanted to go up too high to, 100 grand instead of taking the 60 grand that we offered. So another psychological game. I think it's almost like, and I think we probably need to do a how-to guide for our listeners to say, what is the psychological game that you need to play in this whole thing? Because they're very smart and savvy in this space, but it's almost like, Rebecca, you're even smarter because you've seen through that. So you've seen through and you've learnt that. And so what is really valuable for, the people who are listening to this is to understand what are the nuances in this process that you're not that. So there's the price, there's the research you can do, there's the agent, there's like the hard data that you can use, but what is the psychological game that you need to play here to put yourself in the best position? And that's never spoken about. Well, it probably is in bits and pieces, but I think we probably need an extensive list because you've gone through already a few of them. And one of yours is really not budging on that price that you've set and almost it's like playing chicken and you're willing to play chicken. And you're willing to say, I'm out if you're not getting that price.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
and I think if
prepared.
Yeah.
You do have to be prepared that you may not sell. Like, you know,
But that's chess. Like that's
exactly.
the game
There's
of
always
chess.
risk. There's always
Yeah.
risk.
But I think if
but
you go
you're
in
prepared.
with a minimum and you all agree, and again, we had this experience when my family was selling our first family home, and the agent came in at a lower price, a selling price by a couple of $100,000 lower. And my mum was like, I absolutely don't want it to be less than this price. And it was 200K higher than what the agent thought they could sell it for. If you can't commit to that right now today, then let's call this quits. And he did. And then he kept coming in with lower offers, and mum would get really angry with him and say, no, 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 no. We discussed this price. So if this is not the price, then don't even bring it to me. And it's almost, if you have that agreement, then all of the psychological warfare in between, wash it away, right? Don't even pay attention because you've had that agreed, unless there's something really wrong. So, and then that brings the whole question as to, you've got to know what your property's worth. You can't go in with like this emotional, you need to do your research as well as a seller to know realistically what it's worth. But if it is worth that, and if other properties have sold for around that or just a little less than that, and you're confident, then I think what you've just taught me is to become the master of the psychological warfare game. And 100% I'm going to do that next time.
I think it's hard as well, like, because if you think about it, they do this day in, day out. So they've had many times to practice, you know, negotiating and, you know, playing that psychological game. Whereas how often do you sell a property? Like a few times in your life max. Guess what? They're always going to have had more practice. They're always going to be better at it. And so you really have to come in with like a really strong sense of what you want to do. And you need to basically show them that you're not going to budge. Like you've got to be really hard on that, because then they'll start believing you, and then they'll start, you know, acting and performing in the way that you need them to. But yeah, it's hard because you're always at a disadvantage, and you think, oh, but I'm paying you a service, so you're going to be in my best interest. And it's like, unfortunately, that's not how the commission structure is set up. So it's set up to really be in their favor, I think.
It's shocked me what you've said, because I have naively always just assumed because you're paying them, they're going to work in your best interests. But basically what you've said is they're taking that payment from you, and they're screwing you over in essence, some of them, right? In the way that they're sort of trying to get you to come down and for you to, but it's almost like you shouldn't do that, said naive Daria. But like if you're going to do that, then I'm going to manage you. And so it's like, you got to play the player.
Yeah. And I think the thing to caveat all this is I don't think all agents are like this. And I also think all agents will act like this in every market. I think they do it in certain markets, in certain situations or certain properties. But I think because it was starting to get a bit quieter when we were selling, it was still reasonably hot. And I think we managed to sell just in time. I think it's quietened a lot since, but yeah, like anyway.
A call out to all the great agents who are listening out there. We really, really want to hear from you. Like, we really want you on an episode. So please reach out to us, because we really want to hear from your perspective. And we know that there are lots of good agents out there. And I think in your particular experience that you've described on this episode, Rebecca, your agent was probably not, they were probably doing their job, right? But their job wasn't necessarily serving your best interest. So you're very lucky that you had your wits about you. But I'm sure there are so many people who don't, who they win. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing this, right? But we would love to hear from the other side, where people are working in the client's best interests, and what people should be looking out for to make sure that they're putting themselves in the best position by working with these types of agents and finding these agents. Where do we find you?
I love the chess analogy, Daria, and it's like, you'd actually be really terrified if you had like only played chess once or twice in your life. You'd be terrified sitting across from a chess master who does it 8 hours a day, weekends as well. You'd be like, oh, this is really nerve-wracking. But that's kind of what's happening. You know, Rebecca said a moment ago, they're doing it day in and day out. They've been doing it for years. You only do it once, twice, 3 times in your lifetime in comparison. I've teased out a couple of things that you did that set you up well in the chess game. You researched both in terms of property value and in terms of sales tactics. So it sounds like nothing really surprised you. Or maybe it surprised you, but it didn't unnerve you. The second thing, I think there are three things you did. The research, as I mentioned. I think also working with a partner helped you a bit because you had someone to bounce ideas off, debrief. You know, Dario was spoken about this before, like having a network, and he was your network. I think that's another ingredient that set you up really well. And then the third thing is, you know how you're told don't go food shopping when you're hungry?
Very good.
I feel like that happened here as well. You weren't selling when you were desperate. You were selling when you could afford to keep, but you'd prefer to sell. What do you think of those three things in terms of them setting you up well to compete on this chess game, this one-sided chess game? And would you add anything else?
I think they're all very valuable points. And I hadn't really thought about the whole partner thing, but definitely, like Tristan and I, it was the most stressful period of our lives. But we definitely supported each other and talked through a lot of the psychology around it and said, hey, do you think they're saying this because of X, Y, Z? What do you think they're trying to achieve from this? I think the only thing that I would add to it is just always ask. So always ask if you can drop the commission rate. Always ask if you don't have to be exclusive. Always ask for everything. And the worst that they can do is say no. But the other thing as well is just always remember what the motivation is behind everything that's being said. And the one piece of power you've got is to not sell, because that's the one thing that they don't want you to do. And that's the one card you have that you can pull. You do need to be prepared to actually not sell though. Like I don't think you can just say it, because I think they can read it on your face. But, you know, if you're in that position, like definitely threaten sounds like a harsh word, but, you know, say that that's an option if we're not getting the price we want, because at the end of the day, it's your money. You're the one who's going to be impacted. And a few $1,000s for them in commission, they wouldn't even blink an eyelid. It doesn't even, like, because you've got to think as well, like this is spread against two agents, against a whole agency. It's nothing for them. But an extra $100,000, $200,000, whatever it is on the property that you want, that's a big deal, you know? That's a lot of love days.
Yeah. Like, when do you ever get the chance to earn an extra $100,000? There's so much you can do with that money. For them, it's not really worth them negotiating and risking losing a $2 million sale for the sake of an extra $4,000 in commission. But for you, you're potentially losing $100,000.
Exactly.
When do you ever get the chance to have $100,000 land in your bank account just like that? Like, it's worth fighting for. But only, as we said before, only if you're not shopping when you're hungry. Like, you're not desperate.
Exactly.
If you're desperate to sell, like, it becomes a complete different dynamic.
Well, I mean, from the other people we've had on the podcast, I think the best purchases were from people who were desperate to sell. And so it's like, that puts you in a losing position. You shouldn't wait till you're desperate to sell. It's like the people we've spoken to, they've gotten, I think we had Faz on, and he's sold it. He got a property for beautiful terrace in for 500,000 versus the value, which was 700,000, because they were desperate to sell it. So that desperation automatically puts you in a losing position. So if you're selling, don't wait till you get to that point. I love that. That's a gold nugget for sure. And then building that network. So again, I'm a single person, so I would need to probably create. I've got,
pick me.
Beck, you're my number one partner in crime on this, but before I go in, I'm going to have to come in with my backup, my group, my posse. And Beck, we're going to go on the calls just like Rebecca did. And I'm going to have to check with my partner in crime, Beck, before I can sign the dotted line. And you're going to be listening to every word.
But I think it's also, I don't know. Again, we need to hear from an agent on this. But if I'm negotiating with one person versus two, I feel like I'm a little more accountable. You know, if there are two people who I have to get over the line as an agent versus one person who I've just got to get over the line, you've got to be a little bit more convincing. I feel like I've been at a disadvantage hearing this. That's the wrong word. I feel like I could have been smarter about this even if I do something like, which kind of conflicts with my values, I need to find a way to do this. But even if I do something like, actually, I'm buying this with my dad, or my dad's buying this for me, so I need to just check with him. You know, at least having someone else to bounce the ideas off or to get over the line, it just puts more of an onus on them to be convincing.
It also slows down the process, right? And
Yeah.
slowing is in your best, not obviously too much, but like it just gives you time to think about what was said. Does this make sense? Is this realistic? Could we do better?
Well,
Yeah.
the struggle of slowing down is real. And for someone like me, I'm excitable. I'm easily excitable. So if someone's saying, Daria, this is your best price you're going to get, sign the dotted line now or you'll forever lose your deal, you know, I will sign the dotted line because I'll be too afraid to consider the alternatives. But this is where someone like me who's easily excitable needs to stop, take pause, realize this is psychological warfare, this is chess. You need to take a breather. I'm going to go and liaise with my imaginary friend. I'm going to need 2 hours to come back to you on what I want to do next, rather than, again, creating that sense of urgency, which is never a good thing. It's never, it's not right. So everyone should be aware if someone's trying to make a quick sale, except in auction, where that's how it is, right?
Really,
Yeah.
But remember Faz as well. He actually deliberately, it's so funny hearing this, you know, juxtaposing the two conversations. But Faz says he directly targets properties that have been on the market for a while. He doesn't see them in their first week of being open, in their second week. He waits till they're 3-4 weeks because, and I think he specifically says, because then the agents are more desperate to sell and the sellers are more desperate to sell. And so there are, you know, it's so funny, Daria, you really do need to think about the chess game between the 3 people. You know, are you selling to an investor who's like deliberately preying on you wanting to be rushed and selling quickly? Because it's a completely different type of manipulation.
Hello, it's Beck. If you thought this episode was valuable, please help others to find it by finding us on Spotify, dropping a rating or review, or just sharing it with a friend who would find these stories relatable and insightful. And if you're an investor with insights to share, hit us up on Instagram at InvestorsInTheWild or email investorsinthewild@gmail.com. After all, we're all mates helping each other. And if you're a hopeful investor, we would love to hear from you. Reach out with feedback, questions, or topic ideas. It would be great to hear what you want to see behind the investing curtain. See you at the couch convo for this episode.